we actually ended up reaching the summit about 4:30 a.m. Just as the sun was rising. It was absolutely incredible. We got to see the sunrise on Mount Everest, and so nervous, like looking at the path of incoming climbers, waiting for Dad. And sure enough, it was almost as if there was some dramatic Bollywood director there, because then just as the sun started to rise above the horizon, I saw Dad walking towards me, and all that was missing was that dramatic Bollywood song in the background, And this Greenland expedition is considered part 3 of this polar trilogy, where you're skiing across the Greenland ice cap. It's a journey of 550 kilometers.
Physically didn't think that I could keep going. My body, every part of my body was screaming and saying, stop. But it's also in a situation like that where you realize how important it is to stay positive the minute.
That is Deeya Bajaj, and I'm your host, Santosh Shiva. Welcome to another episode of RunYogi Diaries. First off, I want to thank each one of you. Today is a special episode. It's the 25th. I want to thank you for the support by listening and subscribing to this channel. It was a random idea that got me started to beat the pandemic blues. And thanks to some kind friends who trusted my instinct and agreed to be on the show for the first few of them, here we are on the 25th. Please do leave your comments and feedback. It encourages me to do better and bring more of these inspiring stories. Back to today's show. Our guest today, Deeya Bajaj, along with her father, Ajit Bajaj, are the first Indian father-daughter duo to have summited Mount Everest. Amongst many other adventures, they also have, to their credit, to have done the Greenland skiing expedition that took over 21 days. We get to talk to Deeya about these amazing adventures, the how, the why, and what does it take to prep, the delight of summiting Mount Everest, what's the larger purpose that drives her, and finally, her mindset for staying motivated. Let's dig in. Welcome to RunYogi Diaries, Deeya.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
So, transatlantic call. I'm in Houston, Central Time Zone, and you're in Delhi early morning. So it's always fun having these calls. Hey, first off, thanks for being on the show. What I'd like to do is maybe quickly give you an opportunity to do a brief personal introduction, and then we'll dig in.
Awesome. So, hi everyone. My name is Deeya Bajaj, and I am a mountaineer as well as an adventure tourism professional. So, really, really love adventure, and I've been climbing my entire life, and just recently have been on a quest to climb the 7 summits with my father. A big part of this is, of course, to spread the message of female empowerment in India. But I would say, that's me, a short intro.
Awesome. Let's start at the beginning. You almost a young prodigy, and you've been doing things that everyone dreams of doing, which is a lot of adventure. But what got me interested in your story is your, summiting on Mount Everest. It's amazing, and you and your father, of course, the first father-daughter duo that summited. And talk to us about where it all started.
To give you a bit of background, I feel like I've been mountaineering and going on hikes my whole life. I think before I could even walk, I was out on a hike on Dad's back, And as it progressed and as my love for adventure developed, and I went for mountaineering courses when I was younger and all of that, I think Everest was always at the back of my mind. When you're into mountaineering or you're into adventure, almost every second book and every movie that you watch has something to do with Everest or mentions it. And it had been a lifelong dream for me, as well as my father. And we had been on a couple of climbs and major expeditions together before. And I was just graduating from college in the United States when Dad sort of came to visit me from India, and we were talking about all of our adventures and all these things we had done together. And he sort of brought up, I don't actually even remember whether it was him or me, one of us brought up Everest, and the other person immediately was like, oh my gosh, yes, I've been thinking about this too. And so we actually then came back. I came back after graduating, and both of us spent 2 years training for the expedition and planning the logistics before then finally heading out.
Wow, that's like a great father-daughter relationship, like most father-daughters are like, hey, maybe go for a movie, or let's you want to go have some dinner. You guys are like, you want to go climb Mount Everest? Yeah, let's do it. That's awesome. That's terrific. So 2 years of training. So talk to us about what does this training entail? What are you preparing for?
So you're obviously preparing yourself for the great physical challenge that you're going to be putting your body under. You're also preparing for, the mental aspect of it. And then the third thing you're preparing for is like the altitude. And so you want to make sure that your equipment and your ability to withstand the cold is sort of is taken care of. So what we did was we actually spent these 2 years doing about 4 hours. So when we would just be at home, say in Delhi, working from the office, we'd be doing about 4 hours of cardio, 2 hours before work and 2 hours after. And then over the weekends, a lot of the work that we do, we run campsites in Rishikesh, which is the foothills of the Himalayas, and all over India. And we do a lot of trips. So a lot of the times I'd actually physically go on the trips and lead trips for people, and then just weight my backpack down. I'd like put 10 extra bottles of water or something, and just make it a little heavier, and then, do steep slopes. I'd go up to our campsites and then run up slopes and things like that. So that was the cardio aspect of it. I think for the mental aspect, that's something that gets built through doing multiple expeditions. And so I would almost laughingly say that I've been like training for that my entire life with all of these expeditions that I've been doing. But we also did 4 practice expeditions, 2 in Ladakh, 1 in France, and 1 in Nepal. And the purpose of these practice expeditions was to firstly be in sync with each other, because as I mentioned, the mental aspect is very, very big. And you kind of want to make sure that you and your climbing partner are on the same, on the same wavelength. And then the second thing was to test out a lot of our equipment and make sure that we are, really, really comfortable with it. Because when you're up at an altitude, your brain almost, it works very, very slowly. And, everything, it's cold and you're fumbling with everything. So you need to be really, really certain on how to use that equipment.
That's amazing. So how do you prepare for the high altitude? Delhi is it's a city at the sea level, and you said you travel to a few places, but for you, the day of your, or I guess we'll come to the number of days it took for you to get there, but how do you sustain that training for high altitude because you live in a, sea level city?
So I think just exposure multiple times to areas of high altitude, it gives you an idea of how your body is going to react and sort of how to deal with situations when your body is like behaving a certain way. But with reference to this expedition itself, the reason why a journey or an expedition to Mount Everest takes so long is because you spend a lot of time acclimatizing. So it took us 6 weeks, but it can take anything up to 8 weeks. And you're letting your body get used to those low levels of oxygen as you progress slowly up the mountain. And so you're not actually climbing for the entirety of those 6 weeks. What you're actually doing sometimes is just waiting around at higher campsites as you move up to let your body get acclimatize.
Wow. And these 2 years of training that you did, you're already someone who's very fit, and you're a mountaineer, so you already are at a certain level of fitness, right? Now, if someone else was to say that, hey, I want to do this, would 2 years be sufficient, or would you require longer times of conditioning to get there to that level of fitness?
So I would say more than the fitness, maybe it was 2 years of preparing physically, mentally, and also planning the logistics and ensuring that, so this included things like deciding which, there are a couple of companies that, help do the logistics for this. So it was deciding which company we wanted to go with, which side we wanted to climb for, what equipment we wanted to buy. There's so much stuff available out there on the market. So spending a lot of time researching that stuff too. And this is with a lot of prior knowledge and experience. I believe in 2 years, it would be very easy for someone to get fit enough to climb Mount Everest. But there's a lot more to mountaineering than just that, right? It is to do with experience. I think, you could be physically tough or physically, say, strong enough to maybe go on a spaceship to the moon, but there is a lot of other training that's required, right, for the astronaut then to sort of be able to perform the duties and functions of actually being in the rocket. And similarly, mountaineering, while it might not seem like, there is a very big technical aspect to it, and I think you'd need to have a lot of high altitude experience to then be able to function at your optimum. So it is as with any sport, you could be physically fit enough to play the US Open, but do you have, but would you have the technique? Would you have the precision? Would you make it very far? That's
makes
sort of
sense.
the comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're getting to 29,000 feet, which is, I was looking at the height of Mount Everest when, just to double check before we got to this conversation, like that's like almost just 7,000 feet below where a flight operates. That's really high, right?
That's really high. Yeah.
That is okay. So fast forward 2 years of training, and then the big day comes, right? And so talk to us about it. How long it took you for you to get to summit? What happened? Tell us about your adventure.
So what we decided actually to do was to climb from the north side, that's China or Tibet. Many people traditionally do climb from the south side. So that's the route that Sir Ed and Tenzing Sherpa took, that in that original ascent of Mount Everest. That also is, incidentally, the more crowded route. So the Nepal side tends to have a lot more climbers. The north, or the China, the Tibet side, is steeper, it's colder, it's more technically challenging, but it is also, we felt, a little bit safer because it's steeper, colder, and windier. There's less avalanche danger because it's so steep, the snow can't collect. Secondly, significantly fewer people. We felt that was also a great reason to choose to go from the north side. And because China is also a little bit more picky about who they give their permits to, and it is a little bit more expensive. And then the third and final reason that we decided to go from the north side was that it also, you don't have to climb the Khumbu icefall, which is that moving glacier of ice, and it can be quite a dangerous situation when you're crossing it. There are lots of unknown factors. So we felt like, though the north side was more difficult, it was more safer. And because we were convincing my mom to let half of her family go out on an expedition like this, that was one of our small ways to make her feel a little bit better about it. So all of this means that basically the logistics now to getting to base camp are going to be very different from what you traditionally hear. So we did fly into Kathmandu because Kathmandu is great for a lot of the equipment. So while we had previously purchased our boots and down suits and our big equipment that we wanted to be comfortable with, a lot of the smaller things, like say, maybe another pair of socks or, some last minute items, we sort of then went to Kathmandu and bought. And then from there, we actually flew to Lhasa in Tibet. We landed in Lhasa, and Lhasa's at high altitude, and so you spend a week there already, just like sort of acclimatizing, and then you take a week to get up to base camp, and from base camp you spend another week there, just getting used to again these low levels of oxygen, and then you finally sort of start moving up the mountain after this prayer ceremony, and that again, you spend a week at advanced base camp and you climb up to camp 1. This is all without oxygen. And then you sort of made it, Camp 1 is now about 7,300 meters. So once you reach that Camp 1, you reach a little bit below Camp 1, you come all the way back down. And then you wait at base camp. Now your body's sort of acclimatized to that height. You wait at base camp until there's a clear weather window for about 7 to 10 days. And once you get that clear weather window, so you could be waiting for anything up to a week to 10 days to even 2 weeks. And once you have that clear weather window, then you actually do your entire summit attempt. So that takes about 5 days.
As I hear what you're saying, it definitely is a test of patience, because you are like almost 4 weeks just acclimatizing, waiting, and then waiting for that window. And then there is a 5 day climb to the summit, correct?
Yeah.
So it's almost what, 6 weeks of a total project for you from the start to actually summit.
Yeah, and I can't even tell you, when you spend so much time training and preparing for something like this, mentally your body's just like, now I want to go, like, you're on action mode. But then that's far from what actually happens. And so it is definitely, very challenging, but you have to keep reminding yourself that, it is sort of a tortoise and the hare situation, where you got to be the tortoise, and you can't and that is the other case, that I do feel like sometimes people who don't have as much experience tend to then sort of go the hare route. If you push yourself, like in that first half, I know you talk a little bit about marathons and things, right? If you start sprinting the first half of the marathon,
Yep.
not going to leave you with very much for that final part. And it's very similar in mountaineering, where people often just think that, okay, I got to go hard, I got to keep pushing myself, and then that unfortunately can lead to some serious complications as you go further up the mountain, because that extra altitude factor does add this complication, right? Like if your body doesn't adapt to the altitude, then you could be in for some very, very serious situations. And these consequences aren't minor. Sometimes rescue is very, very difficult. So not knowing your body and not knowing how it'll react in altitude is all a byproduct of not having enough experience. And that can lead to some extremely serious consequences if things start to go wrong.
So you and Dad are a team, and
Yeah.
who plays what role? Who's the captain?
I think so. This is a great question. When we started going out on I was 14 when we both went on our first major expedition. This was a sea kayaking expedition.
Wow.
Along the coast of Greenland. And then 3 years later, we actually went cross-country skiing across the Greenland ice cap, which was also an amazing, amazing adventure. But as our expeditions progressed, I think when it started out initially, Dad was very much so the captain, in terms of, I didn't have enough experience, and so he would be making the difficult calls. But as we've been climbing together and doing more expeditions together, and I've also, when I was in the US, spent a lot of time outdoors, and with the Cornell outdoor education system, so we did a lot of trips and everything. And so I also got experience independently and started to develop my outdoor knowledge and sort of skills. So I think through the years now, we've sort of developed a very strong, now we are more partners. And because during my formative years of adventure, Dad was my biggest influence. We do have very similar thinking when it comes to being on the mountain. So it's funny because I can almost look at Dad in any situation and know exactly what he's thinking, how he's going to react, and, what we should do. And so there's that cool little, connection that we have. And sometimes it, transfers down to Delhi. Well, it's very one-sided in Delhi. And the mountains, Dad can look at me and he can be like, okay, I know what you're thinking too. But in Delhi, I think I can still tell what he's thinking, but he has no clue. Once we come back to the city, he becomes your typical dad again and gets confused, and he's like, I don't understand. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely want to talk to your dad about how to be a great dad. He's definitely gotten some things right with you. So awesome. And so 5 days to the summit from Camp 3, correct? Camp 3 is your...
So, it's actually 5 days to the summit then from base camp as you start to then ascend And you can do this sort of, so you go from base camp to intermediate camp, spend a night there, then you climb up to advanced base camp and you spend 2 nights there, just getting everything prepped. Then you climb up to camp 1, you're spending 1 night there, go up to camp 2, you're spending a night there, and then that next morning you wake up, it's about 8 a.m. in the morning, and you climb up to camp 3, you reach there by about 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a shorter climb that day. You are using supplemental oxygen now, and you rest. So camp 3 has a tent, and you're resting there inside for about 6 hours. Then you get up, you eat a little bit, you get all your equipment on, and at 8 p.m. at night, you actually leave for the summit attempt. And you're climbing through the night, and that's because conditions on the mountain tend to be more stable at night. And you climb through the night. We actually ended up reaching the summit about 4:30 a.m. Just as the sun was rising. It was absolutely incredible. We got to see the sunrise on Mount Everest, and then you spend about 5 to 10 minutes, if you're lucky, if it's not too windy, at the summit itself, and then you head back down, all the way back down to camp 1.
So
And,
let's pause at
yes,
that moment
yes,
when you
yes.
summited. So talk to us about that moment. How was it? Tell us about it. Just describe to us visually, what were you seeing? What were you feeling? How was it? That's 10 minutes.
So we actually, so about an hour before the summit, had a bit of an incident where Dad's oxygen mask, he turned to me and he said, I can't breathe. And we both had been climbing strongly through the night, and everything was going well. And for him to suddenly turn back and say that to me, I think both of us, like, sort of, I was freaking out. But it was a very difficult situation because there were climbers behind us, so we both couldn't stop together. It was also very, very cold. And through the expedition, I had lost a lot of weight. And stopping meant that your body stops generating heat, and I would immediately become very, very cold and possibly, unable to keep going further. So we had two options. I could either keep climbing or turn back, but I couldn't wait there with Dad. And it was a no-brainer for him. He was like, Deeya, you keep climbing. This is now, you're above 8,000 meters. This is the death zone. Your body is not functioning at its optimum by any stretch of imagination. And your brain too is really fuzzy, right? So anything that you're thinking or doing, it takes you a lot longer to process. And when Dad said, okay, you keep going, I don't think I even really knew sort of, how to react, what to say, what to do. I was really, really nervous, really, really worried about him. But sort of, kept going slowly. And he said, don't worry, I'm sure they have, like, so our Sherpa Sardar, he was like, I'm sure he has something. Don't worry, you keep going, I'll catch up. And so I'm climbing, right? And I actually end up reaching the summit. And the wind has died down completely now. It's still dark, but it's not that cold. And, by not that cold, I mean, it's a toasty minus 20 degrees Celsius, that vibe. And, so we're sitting there at the summit, and I've got my down suit on and everything. And I don't think it hit me that I had reached. I was just so nervous, like looking at the path of incoming climbers, waiting for Dad. And sure enough, it was almost as if, there was some dramatic Bollywood director there, because then just as the sun started to rise above the horizon, I saw Dad walking towards me, and all that was missing was that dramatic Bollywood song in the background, to really like make that a movie moment. But then, so as Dad then slowly walks towards me, we both like hug at the summit of Mount Everest, and we're crying, and it's just such a special moment, I think. And more than anything, it was very, very exciting to unfurl our national flag. We were climbing as a father-daughter team, as India's first father-daughter team, not only because we love climbing and we love mountaineering and, hey, this is something we wanted to do, but also because I've always felt very fortunate to have grown up in a family where I've been encouraged to follow my dreams and passions, regardless of my gender. And unfortunately, that isn't the case in many families all over the world. Boys are often given different opportunities or different treatment, and especially then when it comes to the field of mountaineering, which is so male dominated. I've always felt very, very lucky that my parents have supported me. With that being said, climbing as a father-daughter team, we sort of wanted to show families all over India and the world that, hey, look, us girls, we can do so much. But I think we can do a whole lot more and reach these unimaginable heights if our families are actually supporting us and being there for us, being there as our support systems. And so unfurling the national flag, knowing that we had this really, really important message that was so close to both of our hearts, it just made that moment all the more special. And then the happiness, the euphoria, the excitement of training for something and finally making it. Let me tell you, it lasts for exactly 5 minutes, because you realize, cool, we've made it up. But now, wait a second, we got to go back down. And when you're climbing up, right, it's dark and you can't really see the steep drops. You can't really see anything. All you're focusing on, you have your torch and you're just focusing on the path in front of you. The minute it becomes sort of the sun had risen, and now suddenly you look down and it's like, it's a long way down. And beyond that, a lot of accidents that actually happened while mountaineering happen on the way down, because people start to make small mistakes. You're not as focused. You've reached the summit, and so you sort of lose sight of the fact that, hey, I still have to be safe. So Dad and I looked at each other and we said, we're not going to celebrate now until we get back down safely in one piece. And as soon as we get, to Camp 1, that's when we'll celebrate. And so we took that time then, checked in with each other, made our way down. Thankfully, made it down without an incident, and that's what it's like.
Yeah. Yay. That's terrific. And so let's do a little bit of flashback. Now, your first adventure was not in a mountain. It was for many days skiing in Greenland. And look, so how talk to us about that? And that was when you're much younger.
So I was 17 at that time, and Dad was actually the first Indian to ski to the North and the South Pole. And this Greenland expedition is considered part 3 of this polar trilogy, where you're skiing across the Greenland ice cap. It's a journey of 550 kilometers. And it's an intense expedition. It can take anything up from 21 to 26 days. You're in sub-zero temperatures. You are skiing for about 8 to 9 hours a day. And then you ski, set up camp, eat, sleep, take down camp, and then keep skiing. And so every day involves about then, 12 hours of like some sort of physical activity as you're taking down camp, as you're cooking for yourself, as you're, actually then skiing. And that was an absolutely incredible experience, because again, while I was really fit, I was a swimmer in school and I had, of course, trained a lot for this. It was also a very different experience. I was the youngest there by quite a margin. And in fact, at the time we did it, I was the youngest in the world to have actually then successfully completed it. But we were also going to be the first Indians to do this. Dad, at that time I think I was 17, and the next oldest person on the trip was about 40. And so, there was no one my age. And forget everything else. Let's talk about, the most basic teenage stuff. That I was going to be away from my friends with no social media, no access to the internet, and no one my age to talk to for 3 weeks. And I remember being worried about that. But I think that's the most amazing thing about the outdoors and adventure, is that firstly, it teaches you that it doesn't matter who you're with, how old they are, where they're from, what language they speak even. At the end of the day, when you're outdoors and you do something incredible like this together, it just creates these indescribable bonds. And, you end up having a fantastic time, but you have to be open to the experience. And I think, a lot of countries right now are really facing issues and difficulties with this whole but there's so many differences, right? If it comes down to it, between humanity, if you look at, whether it's male or female, color of your skin, the language you speak, what religion you are, there's so many ways to differentiate between humans. But adventure sort of teaches you that it's so easy to look beyond that, because when you're out there and you're doing something challenging together, you realize that there's this essential humanity that connects everyone. And if you really focus in on that, you'll find connections with everyone, and you're going to have an incredible experience, but you have to let yourself be open to that experience. And so sort of I totally, got over all of my fears and frustrations about like being, the youngest and not having any like social media, not having like access to my friends and all of that. Like it seems so trivial by the end of the expedition, because I had such a fantastic time. And the second thing that I'll also say was a big learning for me on this big expedition was um, this tech connect. I think today's world, we're so driven with technology and our phones and our laptops and everything, that it's sometimes easy to forget that there's a world out there. And I think that's what the appeal of sport is, right? That's why we go out there and we do endurance running, or you're swimming, or you're going kayaking, or whatever it is. It's because for those couple of hours or a couple of days, you then go back to being a human in its purest form. You're just contending with nature, you're contending with your body, you're challenging yourself mentally and physically. And there's something so beautiful and addictive about that, right? That high that you get after being outdoors, or that runner's high, or whatever it is. There's something so magnificent about that. It just keeps you going back for more. Um,
Yep,
and so
absolutely.
that's sort of, I think the biggest learning from the expedition,
Yeah,
at least
yeah,
with me.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can feel the energy coming through, and I can feel I can sense the passion you have for it. It's amazing. That's great. And I think especially for young people, it's a great example you're setting. I'm sure that your friends' moms are saying, "Diya ko dekho, usse seekho." It's like your friends must be telling you, "You're setting very high standards for us, man. Let's just hang out on, Instagram and Snapchat, and you're doing all this." Anyway, I'm just kidding. But
I
no,
know. Well,
great.
to be honest, though, I think, again, I've grown up in Delhi, right? So a lot of my friends are city kids, and their parents are also city, born and brought up in the city. So a lot of the times, I think they're like, "Yeah, Dia, what you're doing is great," but then they'll be like, your friend Dia, she's a little crazy, like she's a little intense."
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. What you're
yeah.
doing is great, but don't ask us to do it.
Yeah, you do you, and then have a good time and tell us about it. Come
Tell
back
us
and tell us
about it.
about
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
that is true. And I think I've seen that among now the running, scene is really different in
yeah,
India. I know, but back then, I think, if you are going to be a runner, or if you're taking on any kind of endurance sports, most people in our community are going to tell you, why do you want to do that? Just
yeah.
relax. Why do you want to stress out doing all this physically stuff? So, coming back to Greenland, so
Mhm.
550 days, 550 kilometers, and how many days was it of the expedition?
21. It ended up taking us about
21
21.
days. When I think of that, it's like you're skiing for 550 kilometers over 21 days. My quads are hurting just thinking about it. I mean, am I exaggerating, or, your quads must be burning skiing for those number of days every day, right?
It is, to be honest, it is extremely physically challenging, and it is something that um yeah, your quads are burning for sure. um I think, but as the first couple of days of the expedition are the toughest, and then you sort of get into the groove, and you sort of the human body is amazing.
Mm.
It manages to adapt very quickly, and so if you're putting it under a certain amount of duress, multiple days in a row, it
Yeah,
it sort of just learns to adapt, and then by the end of it, it's like cool. There's
yeah,
no,
that's true.
again, I'm not gonna discredit how difficult it was, and there are, of course, when the weather turns, it can be extremely challenging. I remember one day the temperatures went down to about minus 40 degrees Celsius with the wind chill factor.
Wow.
And I was a scrawny little kid, right? With and the wind speeds were so high that the wind was literally knocking me over.
Wow.
That was frightening, and you'd have to, like, so I'd fall over and then I'd have to get back up and keep skiing, because stopping at this time, again, as I mentioned before, right, a lot of these times when you stop, your body stops generating heat, you become cold very, very
Yeah,
fast. The wind speeds were so high that we couldn't actually take out that emergency tent that we'd been keeping, because it would have just blown away. And in a situation like that, you just have to keep going. And as a 17-year-old, I never faced a situation where I was frightened, I was scared, I didn't know, I physically didn't think that I could keep going. My body, every part of my body was screaming and saying, stop. But it's also in a situation like that where you realize how important it is to stay positive. The minute you start thinking negatively, the minute you start going down that trap of, why am I doing this? Why am I here? This is so difficult. That's sort of where you lose
yeah,
sight of your goal. So I think it's really, really important to be positive. And I remember, one thing that really helped me at that time was I was like gritting my teeth, like there were almost like tears in my eyes, because I was like struggling so much. And I would take a couple of, like I would be skiing a little bit, and then the wind would knock me down, and I'd have to get back up again and keep skiing, and you're cold and you're tired and you're hungry. Um, but I remember, Dad was skiing right behind me at that time, and he said, Deeya, keep going, you've got this. And he would keep doing that, every 10 minutes or so. And he couldn't really see, he could see that I was struggling, but you can't see each other's faces, right? Everything's covered. But I think intuitively, he also knew that this was a really, really intense situation. But he kept his positivity, and, I really drew strength from his strength. And I realized at that time how important it is to have a great support system. And in these extreme challenging situations, it's very easy to sort of also be negative to the people you're around, and to snap and to be frustrated. And I think the pandemic has also given us an opportunity to see how we are sometimes at our most weak points. But I think if you understand that and you reframe the situation, you understand that you're feeling frustrated and tired, but you dig deep and you see, okay, I'm going to change that perspective, I'm going to change that attitude, and I'm going to be a pillar of support and positivity for the people around me. I think in a way you can draw strength from that as well. So not only do you give strength to other people, but you find strength in that yourself. And so again, yes, while the physical challenges are tough, you realize that at the end of the day, it's all a mental
yeah.
game.
Yeah, no, that's very wise words. I think that I completely agree with that. I do believe that's true, which is the best way to up your sense of being, or your is to go make a difference with someone else. It automatically rubs off on you. When you make someone empower someone, it automatically empowers you. That's well said. Well said. So in pandemic, you talked about pandemic. So how are you channelizing your energy? You seem to be someone who's like really high energy, doing all this amazing endurance feats. How are you channelizing that during this time, lockdown time?
So I do try and make it a point to do some form of physical activity every day. I think that has been something that's been very centering for me. So during the start of the lockdown, there was a point where you couldn't even move out of your house. And that's how strict it was. So even if I'd just be at home, I would be spending my time actually doing workouts at home, doing a little like boxing sessions, or doing just basic like abs, or small workouts like that, but trying to get my nervous energy out like that. And then as the lockdown as it eased up a little, I'd go out a lot on runs. And then towards the last couple of months, I was even playing tennis, which is a great socially distanced option to play. And so I'd be playing tennis every day, trying to keep as fit, because I really do miss the outdoors and being able to go out and do things outside. Eventually, when the pollution and things started to become a little bit higher in Delhi, because a lot of the work that I have been doing has been working from home, working off a laptop. I decided to actually then go somewhere, relocate to a place which would allow me to then spend some time, whether it was kayaking or running or um, go swimming in the ocean. So I actually moved to Goa for a couple of weeks, and I'm actually going to head back. I came back to Delhi for a family gathering, but I'll be heading back there. Just so that I can get that time outside. But I think even if you don't have the option to relocate, right? This has been a difficult time. I think what our business, so where I work is an adventure tourism company. We own and operate campsites in the foothills of the Himalayas, and we take adventurers or people who are just starting out on their adventures all over India for soft adventures. So we do rafting, zip lining, hiking, that sort of stuff. And a lot of the people that come to us were school groups, international school groups or international, travelers. And through the lockdown, everything stopped, right? And so again, there were two ways, right? That I think life hasn't been the way anyone planned it. I think the past 6 months have been a complete roller coaster. Dad and I were supposed to attempt our final of the 7 summits, Denali, in June. I was supposed to leave for my MBA at Wharton in August. And this pandemic has certainly been a curveball. But I think, it's all about the way you approach a situation. I was missing the outdoors so much, and and I had a little bit of free time. So what I've really been now working on has been actually speaking to people. So whether it's corporates or, doing podcasts or doing Zoom sessions for schools, doing motivational sessions for companies. But I've been using this time to really relive my adventures then virtually, to speak about it and to share these learnings, because I definitely think that resilience is the need of the hour right now. And I have had a lot of experience with building that resilience through my expeditions from a very young age. And so talking about it and sort of spreading that, as I said, being a pillar of support for other people, or being, even if it's just a spark that you're inspiring someone to change, to change the way they're thinking. I think that too does give me a renewed sense of purpose and drive. So those are the two main things that I've really been focusing on, has been to share my story, share my learnings. And the other thing is to make sure I take that time out to stay fit, whether it's doing, yoga or some form of more extreme physical activity, to sort of keep myself centered and ready to go out whenever that comes up next.
Absolutely. Makes sense. By the way, ever since you started to speaking about the whole Greenland and your 17-year-old experience, the audio got improved. I don't know. Maybe the internet suddenly felt energized. Just kidding.
Fantastic. I'm glad that.
Yeah, it's suddenly the internet just woke up and said, "Yeah, I just better wake up now." Awesome. Yeah, that's terrific. So what's next? I mean, I know we're waiting for the pandemic to come to a halt, but it's amazing. You're planning to go to Wharton for MBA. So is that what's next in terms of big adventures, the MBA now?
The next big adventure is the MBA. Before, we're hopefully planning to climb Denali. So in Alaska, we'll hopefully attempt that in June next year, if fingers crossed, all things sort of stabilize. But yeah, then the next big adventure is the MBA, and I think that's going to be an exciting adventure of its own. But adventure is a big part of my life, and I always will take the time out to go outside, go outdoors. It might not be an intense 2-month expedition, but it'll certainly be something. And then I'm only 26, so I have, I think, a lifetime of adventure ahead of me, and so many exciting places all over this world to go climb, explore, dive, kayak, so ski. There's so many things to do, and yeah, I'm excited.
The world's a playground, yeah. For you, someone like you, the world's a playground, yeah. So hey, that's I think we're kind of coming to an end of our conversation. Really love the conversation. I love the energy, the passion that you bring. to the adventure. Your zest for life is very infectious. Even if you're not meeting you in person, I can feel the zest of your life coming through the internet. Even the internet woke up. So I'm sure that's what who you are for people around you. That's what you're doing. So we'll definitely be following your adventure and keep at it. Hope the pandemic will end soon and you get back into doing all this amazing stuff you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And this was really, it was fun, great talking to you. And looking forward to hearing more. I've been in touch with the podcast as well, and it's been super interesting listening to some of your learnings and some of the guests you bring on. Really looking forward to listening to more of your podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.